Hello, lovely people. Welcome once again to Abenasia's Recipes. Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's video, I'm sharing with you a very nutritious northern Ghanaian dish called Tuozafi or Diehuo. It is prepared with nutritious ingredients like jute leaves and locust beans. Let's get right into it. I have here 5 large onions, habanero pepper, ginger, and garlic. I'll be cutting my onions up and then blend it all together with the ginger, garlic, and the habanero pepper. My blender is not big enough, so I'll be blending it in 2 batches. I'll add water and then I will blend. My first batch is done blending. I'll pour it into a bowl and then begin blending the second batch. Second batch is also done blending. In this pot, I have variety of meats. I have goat meat, beef, tripe, liver, and intestines. I'll then scoop some of my blended up vegetables, the onion, garlic, and ginger blend on my meat. I did about 3 scoops. I will come in with a tablespoon of salt and a tablespoon of beef bouillon. You can use any seasoning of choice, and then I will give it a mix. Your girl is not feeling well today, but that doesn't stop me from bringing you guys a good content. I'll cover and then allow it to steam for about 10 minutes. Now let's begin making the stew. In a pot, I'm pouring about 3 cups of palm oil, and then I will come in with my chopped onions. This is 1 large chopped onions, and then I will give it a mix. I'll leave the onion to cook for about 5 minutes, and then I will come in with the remaining of my blended up vegetables, which is the onion, garlic, and the habanero pepper and ginger, and then give it a mix. I'll cover and allow it to cook for about 5 to 7 minutes. And whilst that is cooking, I'm going to go ahead to check my meat and give it a stir. I won't be adding any water to my meat. I want it to cook in its own stock. There's enough stock on the meat, so I'm not adding any water. I'll cover and allow it to cook 20 minutes undisturbed. Whilst that is cooking, I'm gonna stir my stew and then come in with my crushed tomatoes. I'm using a 24-ounce crushed tomato, and then I will give it a stir. I'll then cover that and allow that to cook for about 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll be stirring periodically. So friends, this dish is a northern Ghanaian dish. It is a popular street food in Ghana. Not only in Ghana, it is also popular across some other parts of West Africa. I know Nigerians have a dish called amala, which uses the same ingredients. It's been about 20 minutes and my meat looks good. It is done cooking, so I'll remove it off from the heat, and then I will transfer the beef and the goat meat onto a baking tray lined with aluminum foil. I sprayed it, and then I will transfer my goat meat and my beef on the tray. I'll then spray the top of the beef and then put it in the oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. At this point in time, I'll come in with my dry herring powder. I'm putting about a 1/4 cup of that into the stew, and then I will put my beef stock cube inside my stew as well. I'm using the Maggi cube, and I'll give it a stir. I'll cover it and allow it to cook. My meat is done baking, so I have removed it out of the oven, and look at how good it looks. You can also fry your meat in the palm oil before adding your vegetables. It is now time to add my intestines and my tripe in the stew. After I've added the meat inside the stew, I'll be pouring some of the stock into the stew, just like so. I'll give it a good mix or stir, and then add in my baked beef and goat meat. And guys, I'd like to introduce one more meat. I have my cow skin, which I was cooking in my pressure cooker. It is a tough meat, so I used my pressure cooker to cook that for about 45 minutes. So I've added it all to the stew, and then I'll give it a stir. I'll then cover it up and allow it to slowly simmer on a very low heat for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, there is my stew. My stew is done, guys. So I'm giving it a final stir. It looks very good. When oil settles on top of your stew, that is an indication that your stew is done. I will remove it off the heat, cover and set it on the side. Now let's begin making the soup. In a pot, I have my salted fish, also called cured fish, and then I'll come in with my dry herring powder and my dry herrings. Look at it, I've broken them into small pieces, and then I'll put it in the pot as well. I'll then come in with my chopped onion. This is also one medium-sized chopped onions. And then I have here my locust beans, also called Dawadawa. Then I will add some water. I'll be adding about 13 cups of water total. Yes, this is a big pot of soup. I'll cover and allow it to boil. Whilst my soup is boiling, I have about 2 pounds of fresh okra, which I'll be cutting the head off and a little bit of the tail, and then I will cut the okra in 3 pieces and straight into the blender. When cutting the okra, you can put as much as 4 okras together and then cut them up all together. You don't have to cut them all one by one, so you can just align 4 okras together. You cut the heads and you cut the tails, and then you cut the okra in 3 pieces just to speed up. I'll then add about 1 cup of water to smoothly blend my okra. Back home in Ghana, fresh jute leaves is used to make this soup. I will be adding fresh jute leaves, but mine is frozen jute leaf, so it is not as slimy as the fresh one. I highly recommend you add fresh okra along with your jute leaves when making this soup. My first batch is done blending, so I'll repeat the cutting process again and then blend the second batch. My okra is all done cutting up, so I've added water and then I will blend the second batch. Second batch is done blending, so I'll pour it together with the first batch and then set that on the side. Time to check the soup. I'm adding my stock cube to the soup. I have 1 shrimp stock cube and about 4 of my small Maggi cubes. I won't be adding any salt because of the salted fish that was put in earlier. I'll then come in with my baking soda. I have a teaspoon of baking soda. Please gradually put it in. If you put all of it in at once, it's going to overflow. Yes, so you take your time and put in your baking soda. I'll then come in with my blended okra. I will be cooking my okra in this soup. I'll give it a good mix and then allow it to cook for about 5 minutes. Please cook your okra in this soup for 5 minutes. As soon as you see it boiling, you give it a good mix. You leave it for about 2 minutes to boil or bubble, and then you come in with your jute leaves. I have about 3 packs of jute leaves here. Alright, and I add it all to the soup. I'll give it a good mix, and once my jute leaves is mixed with the okra soup, I will turn my stove off. The jute leaf is cooked jute leaf that was frozen, and I made sure to thaw it. It is at room temperature, so once it goes inside the soup, just mix it nicely and then remove it from heat. You can find this in the African market. It is also called molokhia or jute leaves. I have removed it from here and I'll set that on the side. In another pot, I've put a pot of water on and I'll bring it to a boil. Whilst the water is boiling, I have here my cassava flour, and then I have here cornmeal or corn flour. Okay, you can find this in any shop. This is the Goya brand. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to sift my cassava flour. Sometimes it has some cassava sticks in it, so I prefer to sift mine before using it. And I will be sifting all of cassava flour that is in the bag. You never know how much you're gonna need when making this dish. I'm all done sifting my cassava flour. In a cup, I'm measuring about 4 cups of my cornmeal or my corn flour. You can use less if you have a small family size, and then I'll put it in a bowl. Once it goes into the bowl, I'll then add water. I'm adding about 6 to 8 cups of water to 4 cups of corn flour, and then I'll give it a mix. So I'll use my hands to mix it into a very light consistency, not too thick. So I'm done mixing that. It is now time to make the dough. I'll be using a wooden spatula to mix my dough. My water has boiled, so I am now ready to begin mixing my dough. And this part here, you need to be very careful, guys. I'm going ahead to scoop some of the water out, and then I'll begin to mix in the cornmeal. Add it gradually while you are mixing with the wooden spatula at the same time. And you have to keep mixing to prevent lumps. Keep mixing until you know that you have a very smooth porridge. Yes, so this is the porridge part when making SIIZE or Diehuo. I'll leave it to boil for about 15 minutes. You need to keep an eye on it. It can bubble and it can overflow. I'll open it up and then give it a quick mix. You just want to make sure that you have a smooth porridge, and then cover it up again and allow it to continue cooking. My porridge is now done cooking, and I cooked it for a total of 20 minutes. I'm using a cup to scoop some of the porridge out. Now it is time to add in my cassava flour. So I'm adding my cassava flour gradually, and you have to be careful doing this step. You need to do this step on a very low heat so that when you add in the cassava flour, the porridge doesn't splash on you. It can easily splash out. So you need to be very careful. Once you know that you've put enough of the cassava flour inside the corn porridge, you then have to begin mixing and mix well with your wooden spatula. And I'm mixing it in circle motion. When you're doing this from the beginning, you need to continue mixing it. And like I said, this step is very crucial, so you need to be careful. So I'll keep mixing it in the circle motion until I know that all the lumps are all out or there are no lumps. So my mixture is too soft, so I'm adding a bit more of the cassava flour. The cassava flour is a thickener to the corn porridge, yes, and you need these two together when making this dish. And we'll still continue mixing it in a circle motion to be able to mix all the cassava flour in. And once the cassava flour is mixed, I'll now mix my dough onto the walls of the pot, and look at the texture. This is a beautiful texture. Back home in Ghana, when I would buy it from the food parlors, this is how I used to see them make it. It is an amazing dish. So I am mixing this onto the walls of the pot. Number one, I'm trying to break lumps if there are any lumps, and also you are mixing to prevent the bottom from also burning. So this is the motion that we mix this dish. And look at the texture. It is a beautiful texture. It is a perfect texture. The corn porridge that I scooped out, I will now add that corn porridge back inside the dough or the mixture, and then I will mix that also in together. Another thing about this dough is that when I let it sit for about 10 or 20 minutes, it hardens. Yes, so you want to make it as soft as possible, especially if you're not ready to eat it right away. I recommend you make it super soft. It hardens so easily. My dough is done cooking, guys. Look at it. Oh, this is the perfect texture. I am all done with this. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna clean the edges, and I will remove it off from heat. I'll sprinkle some cold water on it and then cover it with some cling film or saran wrap, okay, and then I'll cover to let it sit because we are not ready to enjoy it right now. And the reason why I sprinkle the water is to prevent the top from hardening. And guys, I present to you my SIIZE. I have my stew ready, I have my okra ready, and then my dough, which is my corn and cassava dough, also ready. And I'm ready to serve myself, guys. I just couldn't wait any longer. It is something I haven't made in a long time, so I'm super excited that I was able to make and also share with you guys. I'll be using this type of spoon to scoop. Back home in Ghana, we have a wooden spoon that we use to scoop the Diehuo or the TZ, and this is how they scoop it into your bowl or your plate. This is how my okra came out, guys. Look at how beautiful and slimy it looks. Alright, so I'm going to give it a mix and then put the soup on my dough. And finally, the stew goes on top with as much meat as you want to put inside your dish. And guys, I present to you my delicious TZ, Diehuo or Tuozafi. This is it. A jute leaf soup with a tomato stew and a cassava and cornmeal dough. Very delicious. I appreciate you guys all so very much. If you're a new subscriber, a warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate you. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for your support. God bless you. Please stay safe. Bye, guys.